Welcome to This Is Better. I'm Stephanie. We have spent the last month or so focusing on children and their faith. And today we have a guest, Adam Giles, who is a youth director.
How you doing?
And I've invited Adam to join us so he can tell us and talk to us about how important and how effective it can be for youth to be involved in youth group.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to dig into this topic. It is dear to my heart, so.
I'll let you know where we started. Our first episode, we talked about children who grow up in Christian families, where one or both parents are Christians, that it's important that they own their faith. We don't want them to just have religion where they know you go to church, maybe sometimes you read your Bible, but they never have that personal relationship with Christ.
Yep.
They have to learn that they have to confess with their mouth and accept Jesus as their Lord. Yes, the personal relationship. And then the second episode, we invited Alex, and Alex talked about apologetics for parents and children.
Yep.
How do we effectively talk about our faith with anybody, but specifically with our little ones, so that they can understand it? And then that brings us to you.
Yeah, I appreciate the work that Alex is doing with us because the reality is a lot of the stuff we do within youth group is a lot of that relationship building stuff, but it's parents that really are digging into that theology stuff. And sometimes parents assume that it's going to all be taught at the youth group, right? Mm-hmm. So I appreciate the work that Alex is doing at our church. So,
Yeah. I want to ask you, what drew you in ministry to start out or with the youth?
Well, actually, I felt called to do specifically youth ministry in my grade 11 year. I only got saved in just the start of grade 10. And then I got a really close relationship with my youth pastor, Pastor Shannon. And during that time with him, I felt a calling in my life to kind of imitate what he was doing and go down the road that he took in his life, which ultimately led me many years later. I ran away from my calling for many years, but it led me to move towards youth and stay in the youth world. So I've been doing it for 8 years now. Which has been amazing, and it's such an important development of faith time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're starting, especially grade 11, grade 12, you have that moment where kids are trying to find a way to be different than their parents, and within the world that we live in today, it's hard for them to do that. They can't move out because it's too expensive, and so all of a sudden they start trying to find ways to define what's different between me and my parents, right?
Yeah.
And faith is usually that place. So for me, it's really important to build relationships with students so that we can have that conversation about when they start questioning their faith, they have somebody to come talk to, which some people would be like, the parents, but that's not always where they end up going to have that conversation.
No. As teenagers, it's definitely not always the parents that they go to. A lot of times it's their friends.
Yep.
So if they can find a friend in youth group, another friend who knows Jesus, I'd feel a lot better about that.
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff that we do within the youth world is building that fellowship of people that are there, right? So whether it be through mentors, but also through our students just connecting together, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we build a big focus on making youth group not just a Thursday night, the thing that you go to every Thursday night, but also there's a chat room that you can connect and you can ask for prayer and you can communicate.
Oh, okay.
That goes beyond the Thursday night thing. That's where the core memories usually are built or are there, right? But it spills over to more, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the things that we do, whether it be a retreat or whether we do even just a Nerf night or something like that, it's built around making sure the friendship's there, right? So that you have a social network to lean on, right?
Yeah. And I was going to ask also about the parents. Are the parents actually involved in youth group, or are they just allowing their children to, that's on their own?
Yeah, it really depends on the family. I mean, within our youth group, we're about 40% of our students don't come from Christian homes.
Oh, okay.
So those parents probably are not engaged, so much so. I actually, most time if I'm having a conversation with a parent after church, it I would say 50% of the time it's like a family is not a Christian family. So
Wow.
they'll sit down and have a conversation with me, and then they're usually quite thankful that we're engaging and we're trying to help their student through things, and so they're very thankful. And then you have parents from the church that we're usually chatting with, and that's usually because I've chatted with them, not usually
Mm-hmm.
about their kids. I've built a relationship over time with them at the church, right? So yeah, for some situations, parents come in and they actually engage. A lot of the time, parents will just drive up and then open the door, and their kids get out and they come into the church. And then when they're picked up, they send a text message. And
Now that's interesting that 40% may not be coming from Christian homes. So are they there because they have a friendship with somebody who brought them into youth group? I'm just wondering, how did they find youth group?
yeah, usually it's somebody's invited them, whether or not they've felt comfortable to invite them out to some social event we were doing, whether it be a coffee house or something, and then from there they decide to stick around and check out what's
Wow.
going on, and then we've had some students that actually have just come searching for faith, right? It seems like this generation is gung ho to understand religion,
Nice.
and like not just Christianity, but all religion, and try and figure out what makes sense for them. So they're a searching generation, and we have plenty of opportunities to actually engage with that. So we try and encourage our students to invite friends
Mm-hmm.
to bring them in, and then we try and make the space a safe spot for them. So a lot of our teachings and all that stuff, we try and make sure that it's easy to understand. It's not too heavy on them, and so then the hope is that their deeper discipleship stuff comes through the extra relationships that they have within the church, right?
Wow.
So Thursday's really that build the foundation of, hey, I can be comfortable here, I can ask questions here, I can figure out what's going on. And then we ask them to go a little bit deeper. So I have like a group that meets, there's 4 gentlemen in my youth group that we meet every Saturday, and we do kind of a deeper discipleship thing. And then there's other opportunities where it's like we just go for coffee with students and have
Nice.
conversations.
And what are the students, for somebody who's listening who has young people in their lives, whether they're in their homes or if they're an aunt and uncle, what what can they get out of youth group? Like, if you're trying to get them away from just hanging out with their friends, but you have an introverted child,
Yeah.
doesn't have a lot of knowledge of religion, but has been to church before, and maybe struggling in their life, whether it's mental health struggles or just struggling because they don't have many friendships. What can the youth group give to that child, or help? How can they help that child?
Well, the reality is, at the end of the day, we want kids connecting with God and
Mm-hmm.
connecting in the Spirit. So our youth group really does focus on worship element as well. So even if a student is not necessarily a social person, but they do have a relationship with God, we focus on that worship aspect. We make sure that we do aside time for that. We also have a small group setting that happens as well within our youth group. So
Like
there's
studying the Bible?
yeah, so we
Okay.
do like our teaching element, which lasts for 15 to 20 minutes, and then it moves into like the small group aspect where it's a little bit more comfortable for students who are not necessarily comfortable with big groups and all that
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuff. And in that situation, I usually pull myself out of that and just have my leaders run a small group each, so that they have an opportunity to connect with a smaller group and engage them, and be able to discuss different aspects of it, of the things that we talked about. So that's always helpful. But yeah, a lot of the students, especially if they're a little less, they're not good with big social encounters,
Mm-hmm.
they usually find somebody they connect one on one with, and then you usually see them kind of engage most of the time in that way. And then you have bigger groups that are the social groups that just go around as a clique, right? So there's a balance there that you gotta manage in the sense that they don't feel like they're just alone within a group. They're still included in the actual bigger group, but yeah, sometimes you just have two people that like to just, I'm here and I
Right.
spend time with that person, right?
And do you guys get involved at all with mission and service? Because I know I've spent some time with a couple of your students,
Yep.
and they were very knowledgeable, not overly talkative, extroverted, but they weren't shy to, talk about, like we're looking at a passage, talk about what their thoughts or their understanding of that passage. And I've invited them, and they came when we had fellowship with the seniors, and they served the seniors, they did the music for the seniors. Is that something that you try to get them outside of that youth group room and involved in church community, maybe even, the greater city community?
Yeah, we've tried. There is some complications with involving the youth in certain areas, just because of how like just the legal bounds of having a minor work in certain situations, right?
Right.
So it
Yeah.
makes it a little bit harder. Like we can't go and serve at a soup kitchen as easily as a small group would be able to, right?
Right.
Just
Okay.
because of just yeah,
Yeah.
trying to
Age
keep everyone
factor.
safe, right? So it makes it a little bit more difficult, but we do engage them to serve in the wider church at our church. So, for example, like Kingdom Kids. With Hillary running Kingdom Kids, that helps because I get to direct them towards serving on Sundays and stuff. So there is that undertone of, you know what, to be a follower of Jesus, that does mean serving the people that are around you, right? Servant leadership is something that we push within the youth group. We also have we had a lot of opportunities through our mission trip through Chain Reaction. So the students that go on that really start to understand what it means to actually serve as part of their
And can you
faith.
explain what chain reaction is?
Yeah, so Chain
Yeah.
Reaction was a trip that we would do to Quebec City. We would ride bicycles from Ottawa to Quebec. And along the way, we would serve the communities that we're in by doing free bike clinics for
Nice. Very
lower
nice.
income people in the areas. And so there would be a lot of training that would be involved in that. So we'd spend 3 months leading up to the summer, learning on not only how to safely ride bicycles ourselves, because we're going on some busy roadways. We avoid most of the busy roadways, but also how to actually fix bicycles and make sure we're doing that correctly, because you don't want to break a bike while fixing it, right?
Yeah.
So there was a lot of training that was involved in doing that. But like the students that went on it really understood what the ethos, what the vision was behind the trip. It wasn't just to go out and ride bicycle and have fun with your friends. You were going and you were serving the communities that you were in. And I would say a lot of the students would have actually said bike clinics were something they really enjoyed doing. They didn't have as much engagement, again, because of the age factor. You don't have as much engagement with the people that you're serving the bicycles for. But normally the students would be able to return the bike, and then the person would, like, they'd have the conversation of,
Right.
like, this is what we fixed on
Yeah.
it. So there was always engagement there. And they would see the thankfulness and just people that were overwhelmed by, well, can I give you money for this? It's like, no, we're here to serve.
Yeah,
We're
it's
doing
just
this
to
because of
serve.
this reason.
Yeah.
And so they got to see that and see how when you are engaging people, you're not just trying to engage them by bringing Jesus to them, which is a really good thing for us to do. But it's no good to bring somebody Jesus when they don't have water.
Right. Right.
You're trying to help serve them in both ways,
Right.
right? And you're trying to, feed them spiritually as well as physically. And how do you balance that? And so our students got to see that on that trip,
Nice.
which has been good.
Nice. I'm thinking about, I brought my children up in church, but they didn't go to youth group because our churches didn't have a youth group. And it wasn't in my mind at all that I could look for that somewhere else, because you look for it, I look for that in my church.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are probably the same way. I want my children to go to my church. And, I think we need to start thinking outside of that. Like maybe if your church doesn't have what you need or want for your children, they could go to the church down the street that has a youth group. And, you can check it out for yourself, talk to who's leading. If you have a friend that's going to that church, ask about it. But it doesn't, that we don't have to be defined by our own building, you know?
Yeah, and we have a wonderful relationship here in Ottawa. Like we have a youth pastor support network. So all the youth pastors that are in the West End meet together, and all the pastors in the East End. It's accessible to all denominations. And we have one in the South as well. So we have a lot of cross pollination between our youth
Nice.
groups. So I know a lot of the youth pastors out there, and they all have the same heart that I do, right? Now, at the end of the day, we might have small differences in theology or whatnot, but that's okay, right? Like as long as we're all the same on the closed hand theology stuff, that's it's totally fine. And actually, I started something that was interdenominationally here in Ottawa called Magnify, which was just youth group,
Right.
a regular Thursday night youth group, but we would do it with different youth groups.
Nice.
So one of them we had, the largest one we had was about 200, 220 students from, I think we had 5 different youth groups there. And I would have a different youth pastor run a different section of the night. So one youth pastor would run the game, one would run worship, one would run the teaching, one would run snack. And it gave us an opportunity to have students realize that, you know what, the student that I see in the hallway that goes to my school doesn't go to my youth group, but they go to this youth group.
Right, right.
And some of the concern from some pastors were like, well, what if our youth group, like, what if our students decide to go to a different youth group or whatnot,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because you're like, oh, like, you don't want to bleed students, but in the same breath,
you don't
it's
want to
like,
lose students.
I would rather see a student. So if a student comes to my youth group and they don't find what they're looking for, because at the end of the day, we don't want people church shopping. Like that's not a good element for the body of Christ. But you also have to find a place that you feel like you belong. You feel like is feeding you in the way that you need to be fed, right? And so our youth group has been a big focus on worship, and worship has been a big ethos of our vision for the youth group. And a heart at the teaching as well, whereas some youth groups focus hard on we're going to do small group really well, right? And so I'm okay if a student comes to my youth group and then feels like it's not the right fit for them.
Right.
And then I'll be like, well, have you checked out this church? Have you checked out that church? I know this youth pastor very well, and I know they do this really well.
Yeah.
Have you went over and you checked out? Because at the end of the day, we just want them connecting with Jesus, right?
Right.
And
Yeah, not connecting to you, but connecting to Jesus.
yeah.
Exactly.
So at the end of the day, I mean, if my youth group is only this number, I don't think that matters if that number of students is connecting with God and experiencing that engagement with Him, right? And so even if your church does have a youth group, if your student doesn't want to go to that youth group, the question might be, well, why? What's the disconnect there, right? And then it might be just being comfortable to look at other youth groups, right? It's not betraying your church.
Right.
I know for a fact, like we have some students that their families go to our church and their students go to a different youth group. And it's just the seasons of life, right? Some of those reasons have been actually because of youth group, and some of those reasons have been because of a relationship within the youth group that they just need a distance from, right? And they have friends over the other youth group, so they connect there, and that's okay, right? As long as they continue to go somewhere, is my philosophy.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's pointing them to Jesus. That's the main thing, pointing them to Jesus. I wanted to read the verse that brought these episodes to light. Why it was after just studying through Proverbs and reading that very famous one, Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. And, our understanding, I mean, as a parent, my husband and I were trying to point them to Jesus, like the youth group is doing, training them and hoping that they would love the Lord the way we did, that they heard the word of God. And it's not to say because you brought them up in a Christian home that that's going to be their walk forever, but we know when we do this, because the Lord has, wants us to do this, to train our children up to know him, that if our children receive him, they'll come back to him. That's what it's all about, training them in the ways of the Lord so that if the world pulls them away, the Holy Spirit will bring them back, right?
Yep. Yep.
And that's nice that, how open the youth groups in the city are. Whether you go into mine or somebody else's, it's all about pointing them to Jesus. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Do you have any stories for us about situations or blessings that you have found over the years with the many students that you've seen come and go while you've been a youth minister?
Well, yeah, over the last 8 years, I've seen a lot of students come through our youth group, and I think youth ministry is a little, well, ministry in itself is sometimes difficult in the sense that you don't get to see the fruit of your work. It's like when you're watching someone, like, I don't notice how tall my kids have gotten, right? And then all of a sudden you're like, oh wait, we're gonna measure your height on this board that we did 6 months ago, and you realize they've grown 2 inches, right? So it's the same thing within the youth ministry world, where you don't necessarily always get to see the growth because you're standing beside them and you're walking alongside them, and you don't realize how much they actually change. And so it's actually, I've been quite blessed in the last the last 3 years, we've had a plethora of baptisms that have happened with our students. And I think sitting in a baptismal service, and majority of the time I get the blessing of actually baptizing the students, but even just hearing their testimony and hearing the growth and the things that are going on in their life and how Jesus has helped them overcome the things that are there.
I love it.
Those services are just so powerful for me. And then on top of that, when we come to the end of our time with youth ministry and we're doing like our grad services, and we're sitting there with our students, that's a special time for me because my time has come to an end with them. Not necessarily that just because they've aged out of our youth group, I'm not going to have a relationship with anymore. I can't put you on my books anymore. I don't have time. No, it doesn't end like that, right? But you get to see them moving on and stepping out into life, and those are some powerful moments for me, especially when students come back and then they message me and they say, hey, you know what, I'd love to do coffee with you and just discuss what's going on, right? And that really hits me in the heart because it's like before you were kind of stuck with me, right?
Yeah.
I was a youth pastor and your friends were in my youth group and you had to come to youth group because, they didn't really have a choice, right? But at the end of the day, when they come back and they say, you know what, I want to spend time with you. I want to talk about what's going on and just discuss the fact that I'm dating some girl, right? Oh, yeah, let's talk about it, man. You want to let me know what's going on in your life? Let's do that, right? And those are some really good moments. At the end of the day, I probably won't always be a youth pastor, but all the students that I've engaged with, they'll always have the ability to reach out to me at any time, right? And so I think a lot of my thankfulness for this job has been, I have a lot of kids. Let's put it that way. I have 3 of my own biological kids, but I have a lot of kids over
And
the
it's
time
nice that God is letting you see the fruit by them contacting you after they left you, that you're seeing the fruit. That's wonderful.
So, and then, a lot of our engagements, like retreats, I think are very important for our students, going off to camp and spending Friday, Saturday night there, and then coming home on Sundays. I don't think parents realize the actual benefits that come from that. I'd say our biggest transformational moments have been when they've been at camp and them going and spending the weekend there. And a lot of parents will think about it as they're going and having a camp away, right?
Yeah.
But for some odd reason, I don't know, camps do it so well at creating just a place where all of a sudden they interact with Jesus in such a way and they have to tackle something that's going on in their lives. And I mean,
that total focus.
Yeah, it's just that everything in, right?
The world is kind of out there and it's that total focus,
Yeah, and it might just be that the fog of life is not just caving in on them, but then, you'll be sitting there and usually it's Saturday night. I've had moments where I've had half the youth group up lying on their knees crying and praising God and asking for prayer about something, and you're like, those moments to actually engage with our students in that and pray over them and understand where they're at, right? So,
I had the pleasure of listening to a testimony from one of your students. It was at Christmas a couple of years ago, and he mentioned how he struggled during COVID. Just that not seeing his friends very much, or some of them at all, having school online, and he really suffered, and having that faith, because before COVID he had the youth group, just, having that, he did fall back on it. And he realized that it wasn't just attending youth group. It wasn't just the fun of youth group. Like, he was getting something out of it. Like, he had started developing that relationship with Jesus. So that was wonderful. And I'm thinking of even those who might go to youth group for 2 years or 3 years, and even though they haven't aged out, they may be ready to just focus on going to the regular adult services, but they might start with you, and then they may leave.
yep.
But as long as that relationship has started, it's a good thing. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, we talk about sowing seeds a lot, right? And it's I might not ever see the growth of what I plant today in some of our students, right? We have some students that come in that absolutely have no want to actually engage with the spiritual element of our youth group, and they continue to come because they feel accepted by the wider group, right? And my hope is that every time I'm
Seeds.
sitting there, we're sowing seeds, right?
Yes, yes.
And maybe 10 years down the road, and they're in trouble in life, and they don't know where to turn. And that's the first time they get down on their knees and say, you know what, I'm going to do that thing. I'm going to
Yeah.
try it and see where it goes, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, at the end of the day, it's how many seeds can we sow? And yeah, some of them are going to land on the pavement, and they're not going to be able to sprout, and others are going to land in fertile ground, and they're going to grow right away. And others are going to stay dormant and wait, and then finally, 5 years from now, they're going to grow, right? And so it's constantly engaging with our students and being like loving on them where they're at. A lot of the time, we don't realize that we're looking for students to grow like this. And we're like, well, look, they're struggling through this, right? And I know for myself, I came into the youth group at grade 9. I pretended to be a Christian for a good year and followed the motions. And then by grade 10, when I actually had an encounter with the Holy Spirit, I grew within my faith and realized that all the things that I'm pretending to do are all things I actually want to do, right? So then, we need to be patient with our students. And a lot of the time we assume that a lot of the time we're like, well, they should know the answer to this, right? They should know that this topic, this is what Jesus wants in this topic, right? And for some of us, we struggle with some of our theology and hold on to a wrong view for 10 years before we come around to it, right? And our students are no different. So we got to be patient with them where they're at and walk alongside them and just love them.
At the end of the day, it's all about leading a child in the path of wisdom and understanding, wisdom and life. It's training up the child. You know that as a youth director, but you know that as a parent. Your little ones are still little, but even over this last 8 years, you had to have seen that with them.
Yep.
The growth in their understanding and training them, even talking to them at their age level, at their intellect about God. So I know it'll be important to you that they continue on by going into youth group. But I'd like you to speak to those who haven't even thought about, involving their children in youth group.
Yeah, I think it's extremely important, even for myself, when I look at my kids. I said, if I'm still a youth pastor at our church, I wouldn't even send my kids to my youth group. I would make sure that they went somewhere else because it's so important for them to continue to build relationships with just people of the faith, right? So even when we're talking about youth group being so important for the fellowship of the students, the leaders are important. The youth pastor relationship is important. And we push the model in the church of 5 to 1 for our students. There should be 5 people that are pouring spiritually into your student, right? So for me, it would be extremely important for me not even to blunt the importance of my student going to a youth group by going to one where I'm the youth pastor, because that's one less relationship that
Right.
they would have. So it's important enough for me that I even think about if I'm still there as a youth pastor, they're going to go somewhere else, even if they want to go to my youth group,
Right.
because I'm the coolest youth pastor they know. I want them to go somewhere where they're going to actually build a relationship with someone else and they don't lose that. And so it's important to me to make sure that people know the importance of youth group, right? I wouldn't be the person I am today without my youth group. My family wasn't a Christian family. I grew up in a Catholic family that was not practicing, and it was through youth group that I realized the importance of faith, and through the friends that I had there that I actually would spend hours talking about some theological thing, and it was through youth group that I met those people. And so those relationships are extremely important.
Yeah. And I would just add or reiterate, because I've already said it, if your church doesn't have a youth group, your children don't have to go to youth group at your church. Look for another church, because I didn't, and I regret that. I wish I would have gone and looked somewhere else. So that's not a reason not to send them. I'm sure you can find one that's not too far away from you. You might even have a friend that goes to another church, and they could just as easily stop by and pick up your children. And it's something for them to try. You know, they may go for a couple months and not want to go back, but they might spend a couple of years. Just think of what that can do for them spiritually. You know, we involve them in all kinds of other things, so why not try youth group, right?
Yeah. And at the end of the day, if you try one and it doesn't succeed, try another. It is extremely important, and it's worth putting in the effort to
Yeah.
figure out how to actually make that work.
Okay. Thank you so much for this, Adam.
It's been a pleasure being
Yeah.
here.
And thank you for listening and finding us. If you like the episode, please like and subscribe and tell a friend. And we'll see you next week on This Is Better.